Welcome to the Panorama Consulting Group 2022 Clash of the Titans review. This is our annual review of a survey that we do of customers using the 4 major ERP packages. My name is Alan Salton. I'm the Director of Innovation here at Panorama Consulting Group. I've been here for a couple of years after a 35-year career working for multiple ERP vendors across multiple industries and multiple continents. One thing we want to make you aware of is we appreciate your participation and attention while we do this survey. So as a result, we are going to give away a free consulting session to the first 3 respondents after today's webinar, and you'll see the details at the end of the session. So given that, let me tell you a little bit about who we are and what we do, and then we'll look at the survey and the results and kind of walk you through what we found. So for the last 15 years, Panorama Consulting has focused on business and enterprise technology consulting. We focus on a number of different verticals that you see over there on the right, primarily in the manufacturing, technology, professional services, healthcare, and medical supplies, and also in retail, energy, and the ones you see listed. In terms of what our practices are, the primary practice we have is our software selection and implementation, but part of that is business process management and business process reengineering, because having a technology solution is only a small component of doing a business transformation. We focus, in addition, on human capital management and organizational change management, because as good as your technology is and your business processes, if there isn't a readiness and a willingness to adopt to change, that can always be a challenge. We've seen more and more in terms of digital transformation, technology assessments, project recovery. We have an ERP expert witness practice. And in terms of financial and operational restructuring, that's tied to our merger and acquisition and turnaround analysis. So it's a pretty complete set of practices around business and enterprise technology consulting. And a lot of what we do has to do with our research, our technology knowledge, and our best practices. So we have gone through hundreds of engagements in many companies across industries, markets, and size of business. And this is just a small sample of the kinds of businesses we worked with as we work through their engagement in terms of taking technology and improving business operations. These are a handful of the hundreds of packages that we have evaluated and implemented for our clients. Because we work in different segments, different markets, and different industries, we maintain a knowledge base of the different vendors, their capabilities, their industry fit, their roadmaps, and bandwidth. And these gives us an opportunity to find the right package and match it based on our clients' business requirements. So what we're going to do today is we're going to look at the user reporting, based on the user reporting, and provide an independent objective comparison of the Tier 1 ERP packages, which are SAP, Oracle, Microsoft, and Infor. And we take the data that we get from the user reporting, we try to rationalize the data so it looks balanced, identify the outliers, and interpret the data so you as a participant can try to understand the lessons that our respondents have learned from their experiences, and help you understand the strengths, weaknesses, and trade-offs of these 4 solutions, and then provide some realistic expectations as you move forward working with one of these 4 packages. So what we wanted to do this year, which is a little different, is looking at the data from our respondents. We found that there have been several factors that impacted what they've done, how they've done it, and why they've done it. And we want to take just a minute to show you a couple of data points that you see reflected in the respondents' answers. So the first thing, of course, is we've seen since the pandemic a very strong recovery in terms of economic growth, and that's what you see on the left. Goods spending, services spending is up significantly over the last 18 months. And from the clients that we've talked to had initially kind of paused their growth plans, now they're accelerating their growth plans because the index of consumption is a reflection of what they need to do to stay up. The other part of it is there's been a pretty strong disruption in the supply chain. And what you see here in the middle is just an indication of the large number of container ships waiting to get into Long Beach and LA. And this is the largest it's been in some time. And what we see is this is a reflection of that disruption in the supply chain. And as you'll see the respondents' answers to our questions, you'll see a lot of what they're trying to do is answer the supply chain issues that they faced, especially when you look at that in terms of how their businesses have grown, as you see in the consumption. And finally, we're seeing that there has been a strong drop in unemployment and a strong growth in job openings. So now what we found is companies with supply chain disruptions, with business growth, and with some constraints in terms of workforce management. And so the question we found, or the answer we found, is that people are looking to enterprise software as the answer. So if you look at this particular slide, what you'll see is that while enterprise IT spending as a whole has declined or stayed flat, the one place where there is significant growth is in enterprise software. And what we found is that or what the data indicates is that more and more these companies are looking to their ERP package or their combination of solutions, if it's a best of breed package, to answer these questions around supply chain, security, shortage of skilled and willing workers, and the growth following the pandemic. So in terms of our respondents and the way we collected data, what you're going to see is that we put out a survey on our website. The responses were collected from September 2020 to the beginning of last month. We had over 112 business professionals that have selected or implemented SAP, Oracle, Microsoft, or Infor. And what we will also see is that it is a broad range of industries, sizes, and locations. So in terms of industry mix, this slide will kind of indicate what we're finding. The largest respondents were in manufacturing. The largest number of respondents, I should say, were in manufacturing, followed by IT, healthcare, and construction. And they made up about 75% of all the respondents were in those 4 industry segments. But we also have some from retail, some distribution and wholesale. And what we also found is that depending on who the package was, there was more emphasis in certain vendors than in others. And that'll become apparent as we move through the data. One of the other things we wanted to understand this year was if we looked at the people who'd implemented these 4 packages, were they primarily national implementations or deployments or international? And what we found is that roughly 2/3 of the respondents had some kind of multiple national presence, and the implementations incorporated some of those requirements, the exception being Microsoft, which is primarily domestic. But Oracle, SAP, Infor, you can see that at least 2/3 of the respondents for those 3 had international presence. In terms of organizational size, the revenue was pretty mixed. Most of the clients, the majority of the clients were in from 300 million and over. That would be kind of the mean point of where the respondents were. But we had some mix that were under 20, between 20 and 50, and you'll see the smaller. And in terms of employee size, again, a broad mix, but since these are, as we say, the titans, the primary big 4, from an employee side, you'll also see that the majority of the respondents were between 200 and 3,000 employees. So the 4 vendors, as we have mentioned before, SAP, Oracle, Microsoft, and Infor. And just a couple of trends or high points in terms of the vendors over the last year is that SAP is moving their clients from the ECC, the old primarily on-premise, to the S/4HANA cloud solution they have. And a lot of that has to do with moving to a product with a digital core. And that is part of that is looking at ERP as a system of record, transactionally based, but also system of engagement and system of insight. So you see more investment in things like Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, robotic process automation, and cloud delivery. Similarly, in Oracle, they are developing a stack of cloud options. They have continued to develop on the cloud, and they have applications for most business functions, most market segments, and most industry verticals, and also are undertaking an effort to move their clients to a new cloud-based solution. Microsoft, which is kind of been a chameleon over the last 2 years, we've taken a number of good products and repositioning them and rebranding them, again, has done something a little similar this year, where they took their Dynamics F&O 365 package and they've kind of broken it into 3 separately licensed products: 365 for finance, 365 for supply chain, 365 sales. This gives them some flexibility in how they want to approach the market in terms of market requirements. And finally, Infor, which has really focused on their industry-specific cloud solutions. That would be Cloud Suite Industrial and Cloud Suite Industrial Enterprise, and some of their other products around warehouse distribution, professional services, and healthcare. So again, the idea being that they have a solution for a specific industry. So kind of a quick closer look at some of the results. So what we found is that when we looked at all of the functions that were implemented by SAP clients, there was a great focus on supply chain issues, including transportation management, that's stronger than any other of the packages we saw, warehousing and inventory. And I think this is a direct result of the supply chain disruptions and trying to get their clients getting their arms around how to mitigate the risk that they found and continue to find in terms of vendor inventory, lead times, and logistics. The other thing we found, which was unusual this year, is that they were the least expensive projects this year. And we think that is a direct result of some of the clients are moving from SAP ECC to S/4HANA, and it's more a transition or a migration than a fresh implementation. And because of that, they also show the shortest duration of their projects. So I think these 2 things are tied to the fact that even though they've done well with new projects, a lot of what the respondents said was they were moving to a new version of the SAP product. The other thing is, and again, this is the direct result of the macroeconomic factors we talked about earlier, is there's increased implementation and deployment around human capital management products. Trying to do more with less people, struggling with skills and training, and just attracting and maintaining employees has been a challenge for the SAP customers. And when you look at where they've reported the highest benefits from their ERP implementation, it's around productivity and efficiency, IT maintenance costs, and customer experience. And the productivity and efficiency, I think that's directly related to how they focus on their supply chain issues. And moving to a cloud-based solution has really done a lot in terms of reducing IT maintenance costs. The whole idea of digital solutions, or solutions with the digital core, is there's an emphasis on this kind of concept of systems of engagement, of how to recognize customers, remember them, offer them relevant information, automate as much as possible, keep them updated. So that idea of customer experience benefits, which you'll see through all of these, it comes from that idea of a digital core focusing on how to optimize the customer experience. Oracle, on the other hand, have the most expensive projects with the longest duration. Part of that is because they have, we believe, a lot of offerings, and a lot of them tend to be a little complex, and a lot of their customer base are in industries that are heavily data and analytic focused. So there's more thought and time put into the construction, reporting, structuring of data, and interpretation of the analytics. Most of the projects were looked as digital transformation. I'm sorry, the least number of customers were looking at their projects as digital transformation, but instead looked at it as an ERP initiative, a technology solution rather than a business transformation. There was a heavy focus on solving supply chain issues. And when you look at the realized benefits that reported, you'll see very similar to what you saw with SAP: productivity, efficiency, IT maintenance costs, and the customer experience. But the other thing that we found is when we asked about their improvements in standardization and compliance, they saw the highest benefits in those two areas, from standardization and compliance, which allows them, which again directly affects their productivity and efficiency. For Microsoft, we found a slightly different set of results. So the customers were focused on sales and customer relationship management more than on the supply chain and logistics side. There was a strong emphasis on reporting and analytics, and I think that's a consequence of the strong Microsoft business intelligence offerings that they have. We also saw that many were looking at enterprise asset management more than the other packages, and I think that, again, that's a way of looking at how they can improve performance without investing a lot into capital investments. And the greatest realized benefits were productivity, efficiency, the customer experience, and user acceptance. So in terms of what the user experience is within the system, they reported that that was a strong benefit, and that leads to greater adaptation of the system and using more of the core functions and staying within the system instead of outside of the system. Infor, on the other hand, is that they really reported that this was more a digital business transformation initiative rather than just an ERP implementation. And part of that is a consequence of this year, Infor customers reported the highest average number of licenses, significantly more than the other two. And I think that's because the companies reporting back were larger companies, and those larger companies, they really look at it more holistically and say, look, we have to focus on digital business transformation. And a lot of the things they looked at were finance and accounting, and also budgeting and planning. So when you start talking about digital transformation, one of the main emphasis is that you look at the financial aspect and how you can use analytics to change your business model. And that's what you see in the business realization: standardization, compliance, and more than any other, new operating model. So these large companies who are implementing Infor looked at the digital capabilities and started saying, maybe we should look at, in this new environment, and as a result of the macroeconomic factors, how we can change our operating models. So, in this idea of not only system engagement, insight, and record, but continuous delivery, intelligent automation, reporting and analytics, Infor showed some pretty strong benefits for their clients. So the type of projects that we saw, again, we kind of look at it as a spectrum from, on one side, the application of a technology solution to solve a particular problem, to the other side of the spectrum, a real digital business transformation. And that's what we saw, again, mostly among Infor customers. And again, Infor reported the highest number of users in the implementations that they reported on. And then the other side, we saw Oracle was the least that were looking at business transformation, and more looking at the deployment of a technology solution. And some of that is because there was this transformation from the ERP cloud customers, and also many of the respondents were NetSuite customers. So that tends to be a different place in the market segment. But it's not a value judgment. Sometimes the thing you need the most to answer your business challenges is to have a good technology solution deployed. The time to value in those cases was actually higher than in these digital business transformations. So when we asked clients which business functions were included in their project, whether it was solving a technology solution to doing a digital business transformation, we found that there was some functions that stood out among others, and sometimes we also saw that there were key processes, critical processes, that were deployed first and other functions left till later. So what that looked like by product is here. So you're seeing that Sales and customer relationship management, you see there in the middle, very important to Microsoft customers, Oracle customers. But if you look more on the left-hand side, you'll see warehouse, reporting, analytics, enterprise asset management. Those things were heavily focused on by many of the customers. But again, warehouse, inventory, supply chain, transportation management, those things are focused on the challenges in supply chain. So here you see, I think, some evidence of where the packages, the customers are looking for different solutions depending on what they do. In terms of project costs, this is one of the ones that's a bit of a challenge to come with some really good interpretation, because the customers, the respondents gave us some numbers, but we tried to rationalize that based on the number of users and the number of sites. But if you look at all that and we normalize them based on the average number of users, Oracle projects cost the most. And again, a lot of that was because the multiple products that they offer, the technology and infrastructure deployment that's required, and things like integration. And SAP projects cost the least. And again, that may very well be because many of the people reporting back were talking about SAP S/4HANA as a migration from an earlier version rather than a fresh implementation. I think this is an exact reflection of the previous slides. The Oracle projects took the longest amount of time. And then again, heavier investment in analytics, infrastructure, lots of data, heavy on data, and there's a whole level of effort that's required when you're really trying to take large amount of data and structure it and make it meaningful, as well as taking that data and applying AI and machine learning to be able to really get predictive and prescriptive analytics out of it. And SAP projects took the shortest amount of time. Large customers that are doing migrations, and that again, because we normalized the time based on the number of users, that also brought it down some. So if you look at the benefits realization against what their expectation was, what you find is, and this is not as dramatic as it looks, but SAP, Microsoft customers said that they realized 77% of the benefits based on their expectation. Infor was 79, and Oracle was 87%. Now, part of that is because Oracle customers, we found, more often quantified their ROI data prior to implementation. So when we talk about realized benefits, what you need to have is a good baseline of data to start with to be able to judge, did you realize those benefits? What we found is Oracle customers spent more time in the pre-planning and the setting of benchmark data to be able to measure those benefits. So were these vendors making a difference? I think what you're seeing is this is a reflection of our early discussion about macroeconomic factors. Digital supply chains, smart manufacturing, mitigate the risks that they were exposed to in the last year. Looking at at business and enterprise IT as a way to mitigate that risk, and look at internal manufacturing like technology through IoT to try to take that supply chain and blow it from not just vendors through the supply chain, but also internally as one end-to-end flow. The customer experience improvements we've seen, a lot of that's driven from what we saw over the last couple of years is the heavier influence on online buying, mobile buying, the whole interaction that was virtual rather than in store. And so the consumer experience and anticipating market trends has been very important. And again, a consequence of what we've seen over the last couple of years in the market. So multi-channel interactions where customers are recognized, remembered, provided relevant suggestions, are kept updated, and provided automation. So as people stopped going into stores and stopped going out and started doing business online, that whole idea of having that consumer experience improved and optimized became very important. And the back office functions, digital finance, procurement, HR, as people were out of the office, the ability to take advantage of things like workflow management, robotic process automation, cognitive technologies took those back office functions and that were distributed And we apply these kind of technologies to really automate those functions and keep them moving and actually accelerating them. And finally, we're seeing more and more of this new technology. So things like data-driven design, digital collaboration, chatbots, AI, predictive analytics, more and more of these things become available and prevalent as the clients start taking their enterprise systems and putting them in the cloud and using a digital core that allows them to take advantage of many of these technologies as a service. So as you go through and you look at these responses and you evaluate the ERP vendors, of course, software functionality still is king. And one of the things that we saw over the last few years is that there was a big push for some customers to move to the cloud without really understanding if the software functionality was a fit. And what they found is technology is great, but functionality still is more important. To have multiple deployment options, especially in an international environment, to make sure that your operations can stay online and be consistent. And then look at things like vendor product viability. So in a changing market with a changing number of channels and a changing supply chain, to look at all those things and rationalize them. So making the right decision requires looking at your future process, mapping them out, defining the requirements, seeing who's going to fit that. Understand that capability has a lot to do with unanticipated events. And then establish a digital strategy that ties to your business strategy and understands where the ERP solution fits into that puzzle. And in terms of conclusion, all of these, SAP, Oracle, Microsoft, Infor, they're very robust ERP systems. They have the ability to provide a technology solution or provide a digital transformation to any number of clients in any number of industries. They each have their strengths and weaknesses, and it's important to understand those and match that with your business cases. Recognize the impact of macroeconomic factors on your choice and your deployment. Understand your organization's challenges and understand how the software will align with your organizational goals. And again, the thing that we like to always focus on, that you're more likely to succeed if you take a step back, align IT strategy with business strategy, and a plan for execution. As we mentioned before, to qualify for our free consulting time with the digital transformation experts, contact us on our website, panorama-consulting.com. Enter the code free consultation along with your comments and how we can help section of the form. So as we wrap up, we have a couple of questions that came in. So let me see if we can just pull up a couple of these and give you some answers. The first question is, how do you compare the BI capabilities of these systems? Well, let me just say all four of these have extremely robust BI capabilities. Oracle Business Intelligence, Microsoft Power BI. Microsoft, we see, especially in the smaller companies, that it was more prevalent. They really liked the ease of use. And as a whole, they were very happy that it met their requirements. SAP Business Objects, which is, again, very good system, but I think people found it a little more difficult to use. And so, especially as we see people, this kind of move to having end users be able to configure their own business intelligence capabilities. Infor with their Burst system, which their BI system, which is actually relatively new, but I think very good, and I'm excited to see what the development is. I will say all four of these systems have very good BI capabilities. The question is, what's the best way of taking advantage of these systems? So a lot of it has to do with preparation. Understand corporate objectives, develop which analytics you need to enable those corporate objectives, especially focus on the analytics that help in future decision making, what we call predictive or prescriptive analytics. Determine which KPIs you're going to be required to get to those analytics. Understand how much flexibility your users are going to need. And then the really kind of tedious start. Look at your data, plan your migration, clean your data. You may need to do some structuring and restructuring, and then continue to test So at the end of the day, when your system is implemented, the data is migrated, and you're looking at reporting, you've got good quality, accurate, and timely information. Let me see if there's another question here. What do you see as high-level developments in these packages? Wow, so all of these systems have very extensive roadmaps with a lot of robust functionality coming in. I think this is one of those things where you really look at what your specific requirements are, your industry fit, how much data you're going to have, how many users you can have. But at a high level, I mean, we see Oracle's done a lot to move to the cloud. And one of the things we've seen a lot is two things I'm going to mention. One is a big emphasis on security, because since there so much data, so much is in the cloud, they've done some stuff with government organizations that they really focus on security and data science as a whole. So that's something that I think, especially because they tend to work with data-rich environments. Microsoft continues to expand in the mid to upper mid market. There's a lot of flexibility in their design, and the modules they're kind of expanding from the core ERP to include marketing, sales, field service, project management, supply chain management, workflow, HR. So again, I think it's they really focus on the upper mid market, and they really kind of expanded that footprint. Interesting in SAP is I think recently they've talked about doing something kind of almost like a higher level ERP, which is the SAP Business Network, which we're really looking at taking these systems, especially all of those that are going to be in the cloud, and figuring out how you develop a network of integrated companies, integrated systems. So it's almost like, I mean, think about blockchain, but on steroids. So that should be very interesting to see where they go with that. And Infor continues to build out the industry-specific functionality for their specific industries, so manufacturing, distribution, consumer product goods, professional services. So as you look at that, they really are focusing on increasing the functionality so you get a quicker time to value. So I think that's all we've got time for right now, those two questions. We appreciate everybody's attention. Hope you found this informative and maybe kind of interesting. And again, feel free to reach out and take advantage of our special offer for free consulting. So thank you very much and have a great afternoon.